Hi everybody, I'm Dan Langley and this is the Manufacturing IT Podcast. Each week I speak with key stakeholders, industry titans and some of the legends who are advancing manufacturing and digitalisation across all sectors. I hope you enjoyed this episode and are a little wiser afterwards. Let's get to it. Hi everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Manufacturing IT Podcast. I'm joined today by Johannes Liegert. Johannes, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Good to meet you. We spoke a couple of months ago about joining me on the podcast. I watched a talk you did at an event. So looking forward to sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom with the audience.
So maybe where should we start?
Yeah, maybe you can start by giving us an intro and overview into who you are and kind of where you work and what you do.
Okay. So my name is, as I said, Johannes Liegert. I'm the responsible product manager at Paessler for the IoT and industry market. So my main domain or expertise is to build solutions in the monitoring market to satisfy industrial customers and also support them on their way in the digitalization of the factories and shop floor, to say how to monitor the ongoing digitalization, so to say, yes.
And so Paessler, from my side, I was a company I wasn't too familiar with, but maybe you can share a little bit about who Paessler are and some of the kind of work that the company does.
So Paessler actually is on the market since roughly 20 years, and we originally started out in the IT monitoring space. So a main product, PDT, is a network monitoring software that's quite known out there in the market when we talk about regular IT, so to say, like monitoring routers, servers, switches, cloud systems. Basically, one of the standard tools IT admins use to monitor the environment, to be up to date what's going on. If something breaks, they're informed and can lead the right measures, like. And what we see and on the journey we are since the last 3 to 4 years is also bringing that knowledge we gained over the last years also more into the OT space, because we see, of course, all the trends, like we see edge to cloud. Everyone wants to have more data, generate more insights. I mean, all the whole stuff about artificial intelligence is growing and growing. And of course, they need all the data. So the most important aspect actually for IT and also in the future of OT is to ensure that the data actually flows, right, to gain these insights. And for that, you need a monitoring system. That's the single wrap up, so to say, right? Without monitoring, you cannot guarantee that data is actually there to do the next step.
Yeah, and I think this is probably an area that's quite overlooked, isn't it? You know, IT and a lot of applications are driving now, AI is driving now, but the monitoring side of things is obviously getting more important now with more data being pushed to the cloud and more connected systems and machines.
Yes, definitely. And it's overlooked because in the first place, of course, you design the processes, your factory process about actually providing the value, right? So producing something, shipping goods or manufacturing something. So the main value driver of the company is something else, right? The main value stream. And in the end, it's the funny comparison, like an insurance, right? The monitoring is per se the last thing you think of. Like when you build a house, the last thing you think of is, okay, I need insurance for my house, right? Yeah. So it's monitoring. And in the end, if you need it, you're lucky that you had it, right? So it told you that something broke. And also the main aspect why monitoring, especially for OT, is important, as we have so many systems from the shop floor up to the cloud that when something happens, you can barely identify where the issue actually struck, right? Because you just wait until the data is there. And if it's, say, no connection, then where did it rip, right? Was it the network issue? Is the PLC down? Did we have a security issue there? Was the cloud system connection broken? But if you don't have the context of actually where the issue came from originally, you go nuts and search around and try to figure out who's the right person to talk to. And with a proper monitoring solution that can tell you, oh, it's the network or it's the application or the disk run full on the MES, right? You can pinpoint exactly where the issue is and talk to the right person. Say, that's an IT issue, so IT person needs to fix it. Or that's a mechanical issue because IT side that everything's fine. And that saves a lot of time and money in the end and stress to the people.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And yeah, it's a little bit about your journey into getting into your kind of latest product role at Paessler. So, you know, from your background, I think you've been with the business, 7 or 8 years now. So to talk us through your journey and kind of your mission now.
Yeah. So when we look all the way back, originally I'm from the healthcare, so to say. So I worked at the hospital as an IT admin and got to know PAG there. And this is already 13 years in the past, right? And always the joke, like I know PAG actually longer than my wife. Yes, I'm married. So that's a good joke to start always. And yeah, then I left the healthcare space and went actually to Paessler, where I started as a developer after studying, right? I led the sensor development, so our data acquisition activities there for a couple of years, 3 years actually. And already at the time, we started even looking at the OT and I got more interest in the space, went to conferences, talked to more customers, built up the knowledge, right? Because I have the IT knowledge, background already, right? Like how to drive and manage IT systems, networking. So I gained all the OT knowledge, like which protocols are there, which applications are there, how they use, how the process works. So you need to understand both sides to actually apply then in the end the knowledge for monitoring. And that means like then I switched from hands-on developing and leading the development team to the product management to say, which solutions do we need as a company in the future to support our customers in these market segments? To say like, is it just a regular monitoring? How do we need to extend when it comes to supporting PLCs, MES systems, SCADA, DCS? So what are the requirements to monitoring these systems? And what does that customer actually need, right, to be satisfied? It's not just about having the metrics there, but it needs to be the right metrics at the right time to drive the right information or decision.
Yeah. And I think from my side, the more and more now we start looking at pushing more data to the cloud, and especially from what my clients do and the people I work with do, network monitoring and IT convergence is becoming more and more of a hot topic. So to tell us a little bit, Johannes, from your side, because maybe some of the audience won't be so versed in some of the terms like OPC UA and Modbus and MQTT, and perhaps you can start maybe by giving us some insight into some of those kind of key terms and what maybe some of the use cases would be for these protocols.
Okay, sure. Yes. So as we talked before, like the ISO pyramid is well known, the typical operations pyramid, like we start at shop floor or the field level, then we go network, SCADA, MES, and then to the cloud, right? And from a protocol perspective, of course, Modbus was always there on the field level to read information from PLCs or write to the PLCs, VFDs, and all the other legacy stuff, right? And I mean, OPCUA is even quite some time there already, just the boost, so to say, the last couple of years. So everyone is now growing, running the digitalization strategy. So they search about solutions, either it's MQTT or it's OPCUA. That's then used to grab data from the edge, from the field, and provide even to like the MES or even the cloud, right? And I guess there's a funny discussion, or not funny, but a good discussion about what is the better solution. And in the end, like using MQTT to push the data, is it more OPCUA? I mean, there are some interesting fights, I would say, going on in the internet if you follow certain people.
Some of the Reddit channels, I guess.
Not just Reddit. So we have it on LinkedIn everywhere. So it's the big fight about MQTT and UNS and OPCUA. So in the end, I guess there's no right or wrong when it comes to these protocols, because everyone has to choose the right solution for the main use case and how the architecture should look like. And then you can choose, like, if you go cloud, we use MQTT. As long as it stays on site, we use OPCUA. But when it comes to monitoring, there are certain aspects that's important, because in the end, monitoring is ensuring that something works, right? It's not about transferring the data via OPCUA, but we try to ensure that the communication is actually working via OPCUA. And there we have also a growth and a requirement to say, now with NIS2 coming up next year for the majority of the European Union, that also security is a crucial role. And what we see on a lot of customers worldwide is that security is usually lacking in the OT space. So the usage of proper certificates when using OPCUA is lacking there. And one thing that's crucial when you set up security is to, for example, monitor your certificates for the OPCUA servers, right? Or also when you go to MQTT, you need to ensure the certificates are valid still. Because when they run out, then the communication breaks down. So that would be the worst case to say we have an outage in the shop floor, or actually the data collection, because we just didn't take care of the certificates, which is something so stupid easy that it's always overlooked, but it's a main disrupting factor when it comes to digitalization in the future, because you need to ensure that certificate is up and running, right?
And is that every year that the certificates renew, or is it a more frequent basis?
It depends on the policy. So usually if you have a good policy, you should try to renew it as often as possible when it's an automatic way. But I mean, one of the worst cases you can see is on some of the big vendors. They even promote on their newest product releases, like, our self-signed certificates are valid since 2050. Like, oh my gosh, 2050. So probably the technicians that are now trained on these systems won't be out of work when the certificate runs out. So if customers don't care about these certificates in the long run, it's just more easier for hackers to get into systems and disrupt them. But certificates is just one part of the whole thing, but it's also that the system's up and running. Latency is good enough, especially when we talk about more real-time-ish communication flows, where we need that. For example, computer vision, you need to ensure that the images are actually transferred over the network in an efficient way. But when we talk about IT-OT convergence, as you started out, so one aspect why also monitoring is important is there's I'm not who said it, the sentence, but like IT will become the backbone of OT, or is already is, because imagine a factory or any process facility where it's not network-wise communicated all data, right? So the network is there. Everyone uses cloud systems, routers, switches, servers. So IT is already there, right? It's not like, oh, now we want to grow, right? If this is the backbone, it's the most important part to look at after the machines itself. And what we there in regards to IT-OT convergence is that we provide now our data, our alarms, when we see something is struggling. For example, via OPCUA to the control system because the human factor is always very important. So we don't want to force the OT people, like the technicians or the control engineers, to go to our solution per se, because they're quite satisfied always with the DCS or SCADA, or they can't something use else, right? And so by offering our data by OPCUA, we enable them still to use their tools in the way they like, but be aware of the issues we identify. Say, switch is down, they can identify, which machines are affected. Can I replace them? Can I switch to a different production line? Whom do I need to talk or call in the best way, right? So that's the way how we want to drive the thing, to say there's a solution that connects both worlds, right? To bring people together instead of fighting each other, usually who's the one who should take care of it, right?
No, that makes sense. And one of the things that, when I was researching for this conversation and getting familiar with yourself and what Paessler do, but one of the topics that came to my mind, and maybe you can kind of share this for the audience as well, what is the kind of difference between IT, OT, industrial IoT monitoring? What are some of the differences there, or is there no differences?
From a monitoring perspective, probably there are less differences because it's more like the knowledge of what is used protocol-wise. But before I come to that, I would rather say the general difference between OT and IT, I guess one most people are aware of, who are also listening to the podcast, that when you say, of course, in the OT, you want to ensure everything is running rather 110% than 100% right, never stop, produce all the time. Versus in IT, you want to ensure like the data is confidential, it's secure. Of course, you want to support your process of the company. You say IT systems are ready, but I mean, IT system downage of 10 minutes doesn't hurt somebody, right?
Yeah.
But if you say the whole production is going down for 10 minutes or even half an hour, that has delays over the whole place in the end. So that's the major difference. Say OT is more about 100% availability versus IT is more about secure availability, so to say. And I guess that's the typical thing you hear when people complaining about, or we also hear on the customers like, I want to use PLG to monitor my stuff, but I don't want to use the central solution from IT because I don't want to have the fingers in my stuff, because they just update if they want, they don't follow our rules, right? But we need to work differently. And if they crash everything, then of course we get blamed in the end, and even they were the original fault, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the knowledge, of course, you need to understand also the protocols. So when you just would be an IT person monitoring OT, you will lack this experience of why MQTT is important, how does it work, why is the architecture different, OPCUA especially also, how are the workflows in between the machines and the components. And if you lack this information, I guess it will be pretty hard to find the right way to monitor exactly the most important things. Because in the end, it's like a V model, I would say. So in the beginning, you should define what is the business actually doing, the main value driver. So in the manufacturing side, it's quite easy, like the manufacturing process. And then in the end, you need to compare, like, can we actually monitor if there's an issue? So you go down all the details and then you go up and compare. So that would be the approach to say, can we monitor the whole thing, right? And for that, you need to have the knowledge for in between.
Yeah, no, interesting. And I think one of the areas that I was also kind of keen to get your take on, Johannes, is that obviously the convergence of IT, OT has been a hot topic for many years now and kind of continues to be. And, probably half the audience listening are on the IT side and maybe the other half are on the OT side. But, I guess huge enterprises and large manufacturers maybe have a different process for this. But if you're looking at maybe kind of smaller manufacturers, SMEs, companies that are now looking to, digitalize a lot of their processes, what are maybe some of the kind of nuggets to facilitate a harmonization between those two areas when it comes to kind of monitoring and such?
Very good question, and it's probably a tough one. Because in the simplest way, I would have just said it depends. Because as we discussed before, we usually see the three parts, right? Either IT and OT is fully decoupled and they never talk and never ever want to talk with each other, or the whole digitalization is more driven from the IT side, and then they overrule basically the OT and say, you need to follow the worst decision you can make.
Do you see that happening much? Like IT overruling OT much?
I've seen it already, yes, a couple of times, but it's usually not the most thing. So usually we see the still separated world where they try to find each other somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So probably the best way to start off is actually listening to each other and understanding what the main goals of the other portion are. So for IT, obviously is, okay, bring the systems up, bring all the data there so they can drive the analytics and stuff, right? And also you need to understand still why OT concerned or which processes are the most dangerous one to be interrupted. So you start with the less dangerous process to start about digitalization and getting the data so you don't disrupt the business there too much. And then slowly growing together and tackling step by step. So one interesting aspect here is we did a master's thesis together with one of my students and the University of Erlangen together, where we actually designed a process how to start digitalization in manufacturing industry and how the process was. So informing the people, understanding the culture, writing down the different, as I said, manufacturing processes, where to start, what is needed there, which information needs to be gathered, who is using that information later on. And it's a two process in itself, like a short circle where you do the digitalization, a longer circle to see, are we actually achieving the right things with digitalization? Do we get the right data? Do we get the right insights? Do we invest the right money at the right place, right? And there's maybe we can later on link it even or something, because it's open available to see how to drive such digitalization also from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting because obviously most enterprises now are well on their way to digitalizing their processes. But, where I'm seeing and a lot of what we work with is in, pharma, biotech and highly regulated sectors. And a lot of the smaller companies now, the personalized medicine, the cell and gene manufacturers, the CDMO manufacturers now are looking to digitalize. And maybe some of those companies are on a smaller scale and are looking to take those first steps. So always interesting to hear, maybe some of the harmonization tips that people have. Johannes, so one of the things that I was kind of curious to get your take on then. So if you were looking to some of your clients or some of the big challenges that companies have when installing a monitoring solution or looking to deploy a monitoring solution, who are the kind of key stakeholders within a manufacturing company that would be the, I guess, buying personas or the kind of champions, shall we say?
So I guess where it usually first starts will be the person who's actually interested in the monitoring. So it's usually the technicians who say, I want to have more information about process X, Y, Z, or we have the requirement that we have a monitoring solution due to NIS2 or whatever, right? From the stakeholder perspective, of course, one of the main stakeholders is the person who's responsible for network itself or the security architecture. Because one thing that monitoring does, obviously, is introducing more traffic into a network, because we also gather data, right? And for that, you need to either open up firewall ports or change configurations. So you need to have a person that is responsible for that and knows what he is actually doing, right? Or if it complies to the standards the company has. Regarding the buyer persona, I guess if you can convince the technician that they actually get value from the investment we would do together with them, or they would do, then I guess getting the buyer personas on board, especially in the smaller companies, is easier than the bigger ones due to bigger processes, slower processes. But nevertheless, I would say it starts really on the technician side than on the buyer persona, to get into the whole round and say, what do you actually need? What do you want to, what is the value? So we have bigger mid-sized customers who say, like, if you get a return of invest in between 2 years, we can invest basically whatever we want, right? If we can argument that. And for monitoring, it's sometimes quite simple. Of course, it depends on the industry, but we had it from some steel sites, for example, where they said 1 minute of downtime cost us 2,000 euros, right? And then you can quickly calculate it. If we have, let's say, a perfect year, just 30 minutes outage per year, and you could say, due to a monitoring solution, we could usually reduce the downtime from 30 minutes to 50 minutes because we know where to look, right? Because we didn't need to search. We know it was an IT problem or not. So we reduced the typical downtime 15 minutes. Then you can easily calculate that will be already 30,000, like 15 minutes, 2,000, 30,000 euros per year you could save just by introducing a proper solution that guides you towards the right thing. And imagine that on a bigger scale. Of course, the numbers are way easier than also for the buyer persona to argument like, hey, look, if we introduce that solution and we have a bad day, we might still save hundreds of thousands of euros.
Yeah.
And that would be the thing.
No, interesting. And look, from your side, I guess, when I speak to product owners, product managers, and product professionals, obviously there's always a case of listening to the customer now and understanding some of the key problems and stuff. But also there's an element of, thinking ahead and being ahead of that curve. How do you juggle that with your time specifically in terms of, listening to what customers need now, but also, evangelizing maybe what future customers might need?
That's a pretty interesting one, yes. And the best challenge, because we have the discussions, of course, internally always to explain, like, of course, you need to listen to the customer and provide a solution to what he actually wants. But on the other hand, as you said, you need to be with the brain always way far ahead and say, what problems will they might have in the future? I guess it's always a good mixture between, so the key requirements, it's I would say the easiest part because they already tell you. But there's one special insight to say, like, of course, people tell you what they want, but not per se that's what they need. I guess that's a lesson I learned quite a lot. Like, of course, they say, I want to monitor that S7 1500 PLC, blah, 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 right? And when you then discuss and later and dig in and talk to the people, you will realize it's not per se, especially just about this PLC, but rather they wanted to monitor something else. But this was the first thing they could imagine on, right? Yeah. One example here, we could say we have one gem manufacturer, I guess it was. So they run all the production data to a cloud MES and back to the HMI. and they wanted to monitor a certain thing if it's working, right? So they emphasized on monitoring the PLC and say, of course, I can grab values from the S7 PLC by OPC-UA, and then they say connection works, and I say like, guys, look, this is just a PLC, but you want to send data up and down, so you need to take way more into your calculation. So how about checking the network? How about checking the MQT broker, right, if it's working? How about checking the cloud system? Then go back. So you need to track the whole phase, and then you know that the process is working. It's not just about the single PLC. That's way too less, guys. You need to look at the full picture. And I guess this is not per se the perfect answer to what you ask for, but it's already a smart indication to say, what the customer wants is 50% of the game, and the rest you need to educate them about and show them the potential they might have in the future. And regarding future things, so when we started, for example, implementing OPC-UA, that's already 2.5 years in the past. And there we had very less attraction to the topic, right? And now we are in year 23, and basically every call is about OPC-UA. Companies starting their new digitalization initiatives, they go to stand and say, we want to have the full factory using OPC-UA. And certificate monitoring is now a topic. So we had one call today where exactly this point was quite interesting for them to say, oh, of course, yes, we want to monitor certificates of an OPC-UA server, because if it stops, we have a big problem, right? And this discussion wasn't existing 2-3 years ago. So I've seen customers, obviously not in the best ways, but they used OPC-UA without any encryption at all, right? And they used username and password.
Wow.
So what we discovered in the end is like they basically sent their credentials plain text to the network, and it was Active Directory user credentials they used for the systems, because the manufacturing system didn't support something else. And it's like, oh my gosh, guys, you can't do that. But yeah, that's how it is, right? And nowadays we also see the trend. So back then we did the decision to say, yes, we want to support monitoring the UA server. We want to monitor the certificate. We want to grab values. That's a decision that's way in the past already, right? And now it actually works and people get attracted to it. So that's the way how to see how far you beyond. You need to think even 2-3 years, especially in the OT, because there it takes anyway longer.
Yeah, conservative bunch. I think from my side, what you were saying, it's the quote from Henry Ford, the car manufacturer. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And
yes,
exactly. I guess that's one of the things, isn't it? It's introducing new ideas, or being able to give companies the confidence that the new ideas are going to be faster, better, and more future-proof.
Yeah, and I guess the trends we see right now, like running containers on PLCs, I guess that's one of the hardest topic we see, or one among them. And the question is like, what the future use cases will that enable? And it also affects us in the way, because if we say, due to this pattern, so to say, running containers on the PLCs itself, like all the interfaces will be shut down when it comes to monitoring, so we have no way to get data out. So we also need to adapt and say, we provide solutions that also run on the PLC to grab values from there and get the important metrics out of the systems. So this is also a way how we need to apply them also to future market trends. So even so now, all the vendors propose now the solutions to say, of course, there's the Siemens Industrial Edge that runs containers on IPCs. We see Bosch Rexroth with their approach. We see Avago using containers on their devices, and many, many more, right? Phoenix Contact, Hilscher, all the guys are starting to offer that. So until we see that actually in the market, because it takes until it's implemented, but then we need to have a solution until it's there, right?
Yeah, no, really interesting. And I know that's an area that we can probably talk a lot about, but I guess we couldn't talk about future-proofing investments and forward thinking without touching on AI. So I guess, are you involved much with AI, Johannes, in terms of what you're doing and some of the products that you're managing and looking after, and how much is AI changing the kind of monitoring landscape?
So we already have some projects running, so to say. Of course, I cannot speak too much about it, but where we try to also go new ways with AI to say, of course, the simplest way when we talk about AI in regards to monitoring will be just looking at the time series to outline the detection, the typical things we would also see for typical predictive maintenance stuff in the industry, to say we collect RPMs of motors, vibration, temperature, and then we do artificial to say, oh, this motor will get broken in a couple of times, right? But maybe there are also new ways when it comes to what we had before education, right? So we need to know what to do to get their information. So the generative AI topic that's currently the hottest topic around is also maybe something that will heavily involve, or not involve, affect us to say, like, the way how to get the right information may be way faster in the future. To say you just ask the model and say, I would like to monitor X, Y, that. And then you have the solutions of clicking around and searching for right information. Because monitoring from that perspective is quite good in that regards, because the maturity is standardized, right? So we have the various protocols like SNMP where OIDs exist, where you know exactly this information can be found under this address. So similar we see for OPC with the companion specs, for example, that goes the same direction. Say there are standards where exactly is defined which information can you find in which directory. So if we apply, for example, the LLMs to that and say, Sorry, we can ask them in the future, say, okay, I would like to get this value out of the machine, and it knows how to get, right? Creates the UA session, pulls out the information, gives you the right information at the right time. I guess this will speed up a lot of stuff also. And I guess in the OT, we see all these trends like uploading all the manuals you have from your equipment and then just asking the model to say how to set up X, Y, that, right? So I've seen one interesting example on LinkedIn where somebody uploaded manuals from an ABB DCS system. And then he had a guided process how to set up the DCS system using the model. So it was quite impressive because you have always the expert next to your side, right?
Yeah, and I guess with an aging workforce and the talent gap, skill shortages, etc., if you can have easy co-pilot as an 18, 19, 21-year-old moving into the plant floor with an easy user manual and interface, then hey, you're going to be a bit more productive.
Definitely. That will be quite interesting to see where everything sparks, because probably we don't know yet how far it can go, but I guess it can go way far than we now currently think.
Definitely. And look, I was curious to kind of touch on your experience, because there will be a bunch of people listening, Johannes, that are on the upward curve of their career, maybe figuring out, where they want to play, maybe coming from the OT world, but interesting IT topics. Your career, you've obviously done some cool things in the last kind of 8-9 years at Paessler, but maybe kind of share to the audience and the listeners and maybe like some key areas that they could get some grounding and knowledging and maybe some of the best ways to work into a role like yourself, or maybe talk a little bit about some of the experiences you gained and how that would benefit people in their following a similar path.
So I would say that the most important aspect is just to be interested in the stuff, like to always look into the stuff that you're curious about. So be curious in the end. Like I guess that pushes you the furthest, so to say. So don't be ashamed to ask stupid questions. I mean, that's a different answer I give to my students when we're on the trade show, and like, it's a trade show, you can ask them anything. These are the experts usually on the trade show, or at least I hope they are, right? And there's no wrong question, because how should you learn if you always need to find the right question to get the right answer, right? So go there, be curious, ask them questions, learn, grow actually, and also maybe bring you in situations you aren't comfortable with in the beginning. I guess this is also a good thing to push. So for example, even though I'm just now 5 years out of university, I had the chance to give last week a guest lecture, right? Even 2.5 hours straight lecture with options, training sessions, describing stuff. And I guess that's something that's not common to say. A product manager gives guest lectures in university, right? And you're learning, right? You do something you're uncomfortable with, you learn, and then you can improve, right? And I guess this is the most important thing, to be curious, right? Going abroad, learning a new culture. So for example, when I studied, I spent half a year in Sweden. So I learned a new culture, how they work, which affected me a lot. So one thing we typically in Germany have is like, we always have the coins, right? So I'm totally out of coins and hand money right now. So I'm only using my bank card anymore, which is unusual for a German one, but that's how I was influenced from being abroad, right?
And I think being curious is a key lesson for life, but also in an area where it is such an evolving landscape and things are changing. And I think it's such an important part.
So the typical thing would be also and that's also a cultural thing, like to check out regularly where to get the latest news, right? So that's a typical thing when you talk to people. Like mostly when I talk to US customers and ask them, like from a PM perspective, like, where do you inform yourself? What do you read? Magazines, trade shows? Like, no, we go to the homepage of Rockwell and that's it, basically. Come on, guys, this can't be. I mean, of course, probably, yes, Rockwell is a great company and they do great products, but is it everything to just go to the page and check it out? Like, you go out there, read trade shows, read magazines, conferences, where you can learn new stuff, be inspired by people, what they do, right? And that's also something I apply all the time. I mean, if it's a good thing is the right question, but they're always being in the latest information, like checking out what's going on out there, be it on LinkedIn or on X or Reddit, like what's going on, where are people curious, what are they doing? Yeah. And then ask the right question afterwards.
And maybe on that topic, where are you going to be in some of the trade shows coming up? I guess, have you got many lined up for the next year, Johannes? Where can people meet you?
So definitely on the SPS probably. So that's usually on November. I would say the best show if you are in Germany, because in comparison to the HMI is in April usually. And the difference I would say is if you go to the HMI, it's more like, if you want to be somebody, you go to the HMI. It's more like seen to be seen, right? When you go to the SPS, it's way more technical. So you have the more technical people on the booths, at least my experience, where you can get the best discussion about hands-on stuff and how to start and more technical discussions. One thing I see lately is that we have, I mean, at least I'll speak for Germany, smaller trade shows, more localized that are coming up, which are also probably better than the bigger ones, because you have the companies around you. When we say about looking for jobs, right, in the thing, then probably the localized are better because you have closer feeling to the people. So when I attended the last localized show, like there were almost non-people in the afternoon, so you could walk around and also talk to the big companies like Siemens there or Honeywell or Amazon, right? There were just one or two people. How do you have the chance to talk to Amazon or a big company in a booth where just two people are there, right? So you have time to have the conversations, and that was a great experience. So maybe also smaller trade shows are a good place to go. So in Germany, the one is all about automation. That's a good one. That's regularly in smaller cities also. So it's also cheaper to travel when it comes to hotel costs and so forth.
And you mentioned HMI. Are you talking about the Hanover Messe? Is that the one? Yeah.
Yes.
Will you be there next year?
As a visitor, definitely, yes. On a booth, I'm not sure yet, but on a visit, I will be definitely there. So.
Yeah. My daughter is due to be born around that time. So my plan is to be there, but maybe I won't be, but that's the plan.
That's challenging, yes.
Well, look, Johannes, we spoke for half an hour. It's been a good conversation. I think a good entry into who you are and who Paessler are. And I think from my side going forward, maybe we can connect for a webinar or talk maybe about a more specific use case, or we'll go a little bit more into the weeds on a project or something that you think could add value to the audience.
Yeah. And one interesting side for me also from the audience would be like your experiences with that topic, because I mean, it's already there all the time there, but how do you experience that topic? Is it relevant to you guys? Is it not relevant because you don't care? Or it's the typical thing would be I say, of course, we never need monitoring because we have 110% working system. Never ever something crashes, but I'm not sure if that is a reality.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, look, Johannes, it's been great to talk, and appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join me on the podcast. Thank you.
I have to say thank you.
Well, that's it for another episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and most importantly, took some knowledge and insight moving forward. If you're a fan of the podcast, please subscribe and hit like. And if you're a super fan, please share with your colleagues and friends. If you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, please drop me a line on LinkedIn or via email. Details below. Thanks for listening.